Nandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamunatiravanachari Yamunatiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Shri Radha Madhava Ki Jai. Hare Krishna and welcome to Srimad Bhagavatam class this morning. We continue in the 4th canto, chapter 25. Jai Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Devi Ki Jai, Shri Gauranitai Ki Jai. We are at text 17. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Puryas tu Bhayo Bhavane Divya Drumalata Luke. It's practically all the words again. Nadat Vihangali Kula Kula Halat Jalashaye Puryastu Bhayo Bhavane Puryastu Bhayo Bhavane Divya Drumaladakule Divya Drumaladakule Nadat Vihangali Kula Nadat Vihangali Kula Kula Hala Jalashaye Kula Hala Jalashaye Bhuryastu Bhayo Bhavane Divya Druma Latakule Nadat Vihangale Kula Kolahala Jalashaye Yupavane Divya Druma Latakule Nadat Vihangale Kula Kulahala Jalashaye Puryastu Bhayopavane Divya Druma Latakule Nadat Vihangale Kula Kulahala Jalashaye. Vaishnavis? Duyastu Bhayopavane Divya Druma Latakule Nadat Vihangale Kula Kulahala Jalasaye Puryaha of that town to then Bhaya Upavane in an outside garden. Divya, very nice. Druma, trees. Lata, creepers. Akule, filled with. Nadat, vibrating. Vihanga, birds. Ali, bees. Kula, groups of. Kolahala, humming. And Jala Ashaye, with a lake. Translation and purport by Sri Prabhupada Ki Jai. On the outskirts of that city were many beautiful trees and creepers encircling a nice lake. Were many beautiful trees and creepers encircling a nice lake. Also surrounding that lake were many groups of birds and bees that were always chanting and humming. Purport. Since the body is a great city, there must be various arrangements such as lakes and gardens for sense enjoyment. Of the various parts of the body, those which incite sexual impulses are referred to here indirectly. Because the body has genitals, when a living entity attains the right age, be he man or woman, he becomes agitated by the sex impulse. As long as one remains a child, he is not agitated by seeing a beautiful woman, or respectively man. Although the sense organs are present, unless the age is ripe, there is no sex impulse. The favorable conditions surrounding the sex impulse are compared here to a garden or a nice solitary park. When one sees the opposite sex, naturally the sex impulse increases. It is said that if a man in a solitary place does not become agitated upon seeing a woman, he is to be considered a brahmachari. But this practice is almost impossible. The sex impulse is so strong that even by seeing, touching, or talking, coming into contact with, or even thinking of the opposite sex, even in so many subtle ways, one becomes sexually impelled. Consequently, a brahmachari or sannyasi is prohibited to associate with women, especially in a secret place. The Shastras enjoin that one should not even talk to a woman in a secret place, even if she happens to be one's own daughter, sister, or mother. The sex impulse is so strong that even if one is very learned, he becomes agitated in such circumstances. If this is the case, how can a young man in a nice park remain calm and quiet after seeing a beautiful young woman? Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Garamayam Darati Svabharantikam Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vagisha yasya vadane, Lakshmir yasya chavakshasi, yasya ste hridaye samvit, tam narasimham aham bhaje, pralada hridayaladam, bhaktavitya vidaram, sharatindurachim vande parindravandanam harim. The verse once again. On the outskirts of that city were many beautiful trees and creepers encircling a nice lake. Also surrounding that lake were many groups of birds and bees that were always chanting and humming. So the chapter is entitled The Characteristics of King Puranjana, which is mainly an allegorical story told by Narada Muni to King Prachinabarhi, who was very much absorbed in performing animal sacrifices, and he wanted to teach him by telling a story about him, but kind of metaphorically. So there's description here now of the body and the environment the Atma or self gets itself into when entering the material world. And this purport in particular, Srila Prabhupada emphasizes the sex impulse that is actually essentially what material life is about. He says in some places also this is what makes the world moving, the sexual attraction. And this is what also, when we hear the Bhagavad Gita, it is said to be the main issue actually of the conditioned soul. Just give me a second here that I can. Yes. Here in the purport, Srila Prabhupada speaks of that the development of the body is very significant in regards to this subject matter. And he says, as long as one is not developed physically and mentally, there's no sexual attraction. And you may sometimes remember, perhaps you have older siblings, I don't know. But you can see sometimes children react to adults, like maybe older siblings or parents, when they either just kiss or do something. What are you doing? Because they do not relate to it as, oh, that's very interesting. They feel like, ooh, what's happening there? So interesting if you hear descriptions of, for example, Yamunacharya's prayers, where he makes statements like, okay, when I even think of sexual pleasures, then I spit off that on that thought. So the idea becomes very much unattractive if one has transcended or transformed that sexual lust. So it is, if you would biologically also take away in a man, for example, certain hormones or stuff, he would lose his sexual drive. So it's a matter also of arrangement of physical, mental conditioning that is responsible for that. So because the world works like that of course through the sexual union of male and female, new living beings can come into existence, and then the whole world can exist, society can exist. But for spiritual life, it is not something useful, on the contrary, because it is also what makes the jivas stay in the material world. And maybe the topic of karma or lust has to be seen also in a broader sense, not just sexual attraction, because karma or lust refers to that there is the inclination to enjoy matter in whatever capacity. No, it doesn't have to relate to just sexual intercourse. So the tendency or the desire, Srila Prabhupada uses this phrase, lord it over material nature, is lust. I see myself as entitled to enjoy whatever is surrounding me, even my own body, mind, and there are different forms of that. And I would like to refer to the conversation Arjuna has with Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, where he addresses this topic of lust. So I think that's important. There are also different forms. It's said even if one does not engage in a physical sexual activities, there's also subtle forms of sex desire and gratification, which, for example, is said adoration, the desire to be worshipped. So this is also considered sex life, actually. This way of being enjoyer, and also in that way. And Arjuna asks Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, how come that someone acts sinfully, driven by something, even against his will? Which I find interesting, even against his will. There's some force, obviously, that makes people act, because knowledge is one thing, and also Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, even a man in knowledge is forced to act helplessly according to the three modes of nature, because simply theoretical knowledge is not enough, or repression is not working. So one has to really be situated in a spiritual practice that allows one to develop a higher taste than that. Because this is all about actually taste. There's a promise in every kind of idea of sense gratification, the promise of satisfaction. Might it be sexual or not, like the idea is, if I think this is what I want, this is what I want to enjoy, the underlying idea is this will make me happy or satisfied at least. So that's why I aim for these things. But then often the promise is broken, but still the hope doesn't go away, and we still have some faith in material sense gratification, as we say. So Krishna is identifying the enemy, so to speak, when Arjuna asks him here, by what is one impelled to sinful acts, even unwillingly, as if engaged by force? And Krishna says, famous verse, Kama esha, Krodha esha, Rajaguna samudbhavaha, Mahasha no mahapapma, Vidi inam I vairinam. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, it is lust only, Arjuna, which is born of contact with the material mode of passion, and later transformed into wrath, which is the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. And here Srila Prabhupada writes, when a living entity comes in contact with a material creation, his eternal love for Krishna is transformed into lust in association with the mode of passion. Or, in other words, the sense of love of God becomes transformed into lust, as milk in contact with sour tamarind is transformed into yogurt. So there's an origin of that. We understand lust, something that has, let's say, a positive original form that is now being, what does he say here, transformed. And it said, like, the original love that we experience for Krishna and also his creation, his forms, by the contact with Rajaguna. Rajas is also the element of material nature, which is, I don't know how to say it in English, das Begehrende, wanting to have the desire to enjoy, but also to expand. It said Brahma also is very much represented in mode of passion. His creational work is a more pure form. And in the Brahma Samhita, in the purports, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says that what we experience here as lust is also originally existing in Krishna as the creative desire. He says Krishna has a desire to create, to expand, to manifest, and to enjoy. And this would be the pure original spiritual form. And also in spiritual life, we have a lot of opportunity to be creative. That would be some way to engage in that, and also to reawaken the love for Krishna. And one-to-one also creation means, like, if male and female, if man and woman unite sexually, the result would be children, right? Not always in every case, but essentially that would be the plan. And that's a form of creating, right? Of course, we do not, the body creates under the direction of the Supreme Lord. But that would be also a form of creation. But since it is Rajaguna, the nature of Raja and Tamaguna is that the living entity becomes more egocentric, Whereas, for example, in Sattva Guna, there's more the ability to become focused on others and do service or act for the benefit of others, be less egocentric. It's the principle of maintenance, it's the principle of purity, satisfaction. Whereas Rajas is, I need to enjoy, I want that. Ambition is Rajaguna, for example. If it's directed towards one's own satisfaction or the satisfaction of the ego. So that's the problem, that the original energy or the love we have for Krishna becomes in a perverted form directed toward our ego, and then we entangle ourselves in material nature. And that's one of the main tasks in spiritual life, actually, to overcome that conditioning. And Krishna gives instructions in the Bhagavad Gita. One aspect is knowledge, another aspect is renunciation, another aspect is developing higher taste. And he explains here further in his response to Arjuna, that he speaks of degrees of lust, and he speaks, as fire is covered by smoke, as a mirror is covered by dust, as the embryo is covered by the womb, the living entity is similarly covered by different degrees of this lust. And Srila Prabhupada in the purport speaks about that, for example, the fire analogy with the smoke relates to if the living entity is to some degree awake to his spiritual consciousness, like as there's some little visibility of fire within smoke. And then he says the dust relates to if one is rather unconscious, but like there's purificatory processes of spiritual practices. And the embryo in the womb is considered like similar like a tree. You know, a living entity existing in a tree is completely helpless, fixed on a spot, cannot move, cannot say anything. So it relates to also sattva, rajas, and tamas, and also since the purport is speaking a lot of the sex impulse, I think there's also it's also appropriate to distinguish between different types of sexuality based on the modes of nature. I mean, Krishna gives one example where he says the type of sexual activity that is sanctioned by him, he says that by Shastra, is the one where male and female unite with the purpose of begetting a child, you know, and then all the other forms of sex life would be not anymore in tune. So it's practically, there's this one legit way. And also, like if you look at sattva, rajas, and tamas, sattva would be also the form of sex life that is based also on genuine affection and love, and based on respect that the people coming together, you know, that they do that. Rajas would be more again egocentric, then it can become excessive. It can also be how to say it, to some degree violent, and then there's tamas, which is a very dark way, which is also very self-centered and destructive. And we see that Srila Prabhupada sometimes remarks also in relation to Tamagun, when he speaks in the 18th chapter, he addresses certain sexual cults that they relate also to Tamagun. Sometimes we see there even in the yoga practice some tantric people connect. They say, okay, there's a form of sexual activity passing as something very spiritual. And why do I talk about that? I think it's also relevant to look at it because this is a very clear and very, how to say, demanding restriction that is put on people in general. He highlights the brahmachari and the sannyasi particularly. And there's the prohibition of association with the opposite sex or women. And he says that Shastras enjoin that one should not even talk to a woman in a secret place, even if she happens to be one's own daughter, sister, or mother. So this certainly will be also perceived as very extreme by people on the outside, and also yourself might think, I mean, come on, if I talk to my mother at the place, come on, what's going to happen? Here, like but we can see also that there is the possibility that what here is actually being warned for against can happen. And in the, how to say, right now also in this movement we have the situation that there's a big, it's becoming more prominent, or how to say it, it is more the center of discussion that there's also sexual abuse going on. In relation also to children, you know. And this also may have to do with the sannyas or brahmachari and so on, or people. And where this principle is not being applied, so to speak, but where also it is important to understand that that it requires quite something to get to that platform. It's not just an artificial, superficial thing you restrain externally and then, you know, it comes out in a very ugly way, as we see it in not just many religions. There are different places where this can happen. I guess I don't want to get too much in that, because in a way, perhaps we feel like, shall we address that in such a occasion? But I think the purport also kind of invites it, because it's a bigger need in our society also, for example, to protect children. And also there's a lot of, also in relationships between devotees, there's a lot of misuse and abuse going on, not with everyone, but it's a reality also in this movement. And I think it requires that people more productively and constructively engage with this whole topic of how to transcend or transform the sexual nature that we are equipped with. And to not like assume, for example, because someone is in a certain ashram, like that's for granted that a person has, you know, truly also left behind that. Because Srila Prabhupada, by his example, for example, he also he showed clearly, for example, when he was dealing with children, he was very polite and kind and warm, but he never put like little girls on his lap or something like that, you know, or touching. And that's for sannyas something actually off, also, or elderly children already. And that's something I think one must be careful about to also observe whether is this appropriate, for example, for a sannyasi. You know, it's something in the past shows that this is something one must be very careful about, because, yeah, it's a reality that there is abuse happening. And the idea is like when we see the principle of like what Krishna also says in response to Arjuna's question, he also, no, actually before that already, a chapter before that, he addresses the downward spiral that relates to this lust, where he says the contemplation or the contact to the object of senses. And this leads to attachment, and this from this lust develops, and so on, then goes further down. This principle can be applied the other way in spiritual life, you know, that we say, all right, let Krishna be the object, let the service to Krishna be the object that I can be in touch with and develop attachment, and then more and more affection up to hopefully the level of love for God, to consciously nurture the genuine attraction to Krishna, and at the same time be careful about the power of the material nature. That's something sometimes Srila Prabhupada used to remark critically and with a heavy heart, I guess, about his disciples, saying they are not afraid enough of Maya. They too kind of think, yeah, I can do that. And one should also not forget that actually in Kali Yuga, for example, sannyas is forbidden. It's not, people are not considered fit to do that. You know, for the sake of preaching mission, yes, it was done. But this material nature is very powerful, and therefore Shastra also puts such heavy restrictions. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went so far saying, okay, women have to pay their obeisances in a distance, or like when he says even a form that resembles a woman, he was like a wooden form, like something, he would reject that, which we probably would perceive as extreme. I think, but the point is that he was very clear, determined, okay, this must be avoided. So, but how to avoid it in a healthy way without kind of impersonalizing the opposite sex, say, as if like, and not create kind of enmity, to treat the person as an enemy, like for example now we could say, yeah, the women are the enemies, but it's not. The lust within oneself is the enemy that makes one want to enjoy, and there we have to start. That is like that to identify our own inclinations and see what is required. Srila Prabhupada sometimes speaks of medicine, that we have here in a diseased condition, and it requires a certain medicine to purify. He sometimes, in the first canto, for example, of the Srimad Bhagavatam, he compares the Krishna Katha, or the conscious hearing and absorption in the narrations about Krishna, to kind of a vaccine that is kind of with the while speaking is like a, how to say, spritze, the injection, yeah, kind of through the ear, which is supposed to purify the consciousness. And yeah, there is a great need to invest in one's own spiritual life, in particular invest in creating genuine emotional connection to Krishna, because also it's my experience like that certain desires, may they be explicitly sexual or simply sense enjoying or oriented, is often based on a lack of satisfaction. We said that before, that there is not necessarily the main need, let's say I want to have sex, or I want to have this, I want to sleep, I want to eat. It can also be compensatory, that I lack, for example, success or fulfillment, or I lack whatever kind of thing in my life, and then I replace it with something. There's also something called emotional eating, for example. It's not because these people are constantly hungry physically, because, for example, there's emotionally something missing, and then it is replaced with, something like eating, for example, or sleeping can also be something like that. Everything can be used outside of its actual, let's say, original purpose, and then to become aware of, okay, where do I use something to actually balance something where I miss, And I saw also, for example, in relationships, my experience was when a relationship was more empowering, let's say love relationship, instead of kind of struggle and conflict, then naturally also the overall satisfaction is there and more peace is there and less need for kind of stimulate yourself positively by the promise of, sense enjoyment. And this is important to create, or like to have circumstances where you feel satisfied spiritually in the first place, but also materially satisfied. That you feel, okay, that's a good place to be. That's sattvic. That is maintaining. That is enlivening. That is balanced. That is proper. And also find things in your spiritual life that really touch your heart, and to nurture that. How to say, still, sounds maybe strange, but feed on. It was a long time. I joined practically back then in Simhachalam, or this was at least the place and the deity that made me really wanting to be in this movement. And then I wasn't there for a very long time, because I lived in Germany for a while, stayed also in the Brahmacharya ashram for kind of 3 years something, and then I lived in Germany again, but then went to Switzerland. And then after just some years, we went 10 years or something, went back to Simhachalam, to the deity, and then suddenly it was like a memory coming back, making alive again. Hey, this was actually the beginning. Also, this was the deity that really touched me in the first place, and being allowed first time to be also on the altar, to serve him, to dress him, and everything was really something that stayed with me, and where I feel like till today I feel like this experience was very something strong, how to say, in some scar and imprint, where an image where I like to go in my mind. Or also when we went to South India visiting all these Vishnu temples, there was something that really caught my mind, where I feel like that's something where I feel also a connection to the Lord, and where I feel fascination, where I feel, yes, I want to be in touch with that form. And I like to go there in my mind while chanting and wherever. So I think that's very important to have also create an inner space based on, of course, things you do and experience in your spiritual life. Maybe pilgrimage for others, it might be different things. But something where we can go and where we like to stay. And where we feel because in daily life there's so much routine, and sometimes, I have to do this again still, and I'm already exhausted. Do I still have to chant this round, or still do this thing? And it's a principle also for success to, if you kind of lose your energy, your enthusiasm or stuff, or like you feel in a kind of being trapped in some kind of routine, and you wonder, why am I doing all that? Exactly. Go back. Why did I start all that in the first place? What was driving me, was motivating me? And then go back to that, what actually really matters to you in your spiritual life. And reconnect with that, to see where actually did my faith start, where is my inspiration, or was it coming from in the first place, and to go there again. And in this way, we can be more in touch. And then I also made an experience like while chanting recently, because I felt, out of some stupid reason, I started to because on your email and wherever YouTube you go, the so-called feed, or they suggest you kind of little clips, and it was about politics also in Germany. And then I started to see some speeches from Bundestag, and one thing I thought, okay, good, maybe good to be informed, but I felt like how really things dragged me down, and I got really so agitated also in my mind, and fear is coming up, because there's a lot of reason to be afraid nowadays and be anxious, you know. And I noticed, and at some point I feel like I couldn't really focus on chanting. I think this spoils now my chanting. And then I made a turn saying, while chanting, saying, Krishna, I'm afraid. Krishna, I'm anxious. And then again, my chanting worked, because I just approached Krishna from there. Okay, maybe, of course I shouldn't maybe feed my mind with such information. But then also again to see, Krishna is there, and I can come to him in whatever state, but when perhaps he wants me to, in whatever state I am, to approach him and take a shelter, as we say. And I felt that was a beautiful experience that allowed me again to enter the process and not be too much influenced by what we say, material energy. Yeah, these are some thoughts in regards to that. Yeah, maybe I open up here for comments or questions on that. Oh yeah, maybe one short thing, please. Just give me. Yeah, I remember what I forgot. Something that Srila Prabhupada says in the purport to one of the verses Krishna speaks to Arjuna in response. He says, he identifies the material world as, call it Maitunya Agara, the shackles of sex life. That actually he uses the analogy, in the ordinary prison house, criminals are kept within bars. Similarly, the criminals who are disobedient to the laws of the Lord are shackled by sex life. So, again, since the purport is speaking about that. Because what also is said by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, that the biggest enemy of the sense enjoyer is the feeling, oh, this is so nice, I enjoy that, that's good. But actually he's saying, you are actually in shackles. You are in the prison. This is not nice. So making clear, hey, there's a problem. Okay, thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for your realizations that you shared. I just wanted to share mine. regarding, doesn't have to be like sex life, but it can be anything that we're attached to. Like you said, some people eat food because they miss something emotionally, so everyone has issues. I just wanted to say 2 points. One point is that sometimes, and it's my experience because I've met a lot of devotees who are like educated in Krishna consciousness, like it was like a school of hard knocks in a way, like where you have to suppress everything that you are, your mind, your emotion, your everything, and just go and be a warrior for Krishna. And then you can see how through time still everything that was suppressed came out. So that's definitely not the way. But then we can say that Krishna consciousness is very natural. Like it's natural thing because by nature we are Krishna conscious. It's natural for the mind also to think of Krishna, but due to our conditioning, it's the way it is at the moment. We just like to allow Krishna to satisfy your senses in a way through the devotional service. So, and then your faith builds up also, because then you can see how in certain activities that you perform for Krishna, you are very satisfied. Like I can take an example of deity dressing, like ladies, for example, they like beautiful things. But if you really surrender yourself to the deity worship, you can, I don't know, have that satisfaction. It's like he shows you the higher taste that actually you're longing for. So therefore, my realization is that you don't have to force anything. Like you just try your best. It's not like you are also, how you say, you don't do anything. I mean, of course you have to make an endeavor, but also allow Krishna to manifest himself in your life and then manifest this higher taste, because the higher taste is the only thing that would take your mind off sense gratification actually. And then when you see how this higher taste is actually eternal and everlasting, and how all this material sense gratification, even sex, lasts 5 minutes, so that's the satisfaction. So definitely it's not something that's very valuable, or like in any way when you are 60 you won't be able to do it. So I'm just saying how if we think about it and if we introspect and also if we perform our devotional services, we can see how it works, and that actually builds our faith. So I just wanted to share that, how it's actually natural and how we don't have to suppress all these things. And even if we are ashamed of some things, there is always someone we can talk to, and I don't know, I think the process works and that people can get rid of these things. And this what you mentioned, like about abuse and everything, in my opinion, from what I've saw, is just because it was artificially suppressed, like what you actually are, and also suppressed, like we come with a lot of baggage in the Krishna consciousness movement, and we don't deal with that baggage, and then it manifests, unfortunately, in this kind of things. So, thank you.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, maybe we can also just shortly get back to the purpose in the beginning, where it was said, Srila Prabhupada speaks of the child that is not developed yet, and how it is innocent and does not respond to, sexual attraction. And I was thinking also of the 4 Kumaras, and I was assuming perhaps also they assumed this very little child forms, running around naked, having no consciousness whatsoever about, physical man, male, female. And to, getting back to the state where we, just have no interest, and that would be the goal. Give our interest. Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Devi ki jai. Shishi Gaunitai ki jai. All right.
Thank you, Prabhu. You were speaking about transforming things a little bit also, and so there's always this question I have in mind, not only concerning sex drive, but also other things, like she was also saying, the luggage we come with to Krishna consciousness, how much we are actually actively trying to work on it, with different kind of techniques, be it psychology or coaching, whatever, these kind of things. and on the other hand we have this, pure devotional service that will solve all problems. So there's this kind of balance we have to find, no? So what is your realization on that, or how can we actually, work progressively without being blindly faithful, but also having the full trust that devotional service will do solve our problem?
I mean, also for me, what was very important to realize, true actually, like back then we did those Sattva seminars with the transformative communication, Sattvic principles for living. And I noticed before that in the temple when I lived, of course there was, if there was when I had a clear determination to serve and to just follow the process, it was powerful, it impacted me a lot. I think a lot changed already like this. But later on I realized, but in order to be fully engaged as your complete person, as a complete whole, you must be connected to what you are, like as we said, like the person I am. If I have, let's say, certain things that I don't want to accept on me, or like, then I can just be partially present in Krishna's service. But tools like, for example, psychology, or like Sattvic principles for living, they can help us to also connect to parts of ourselves that make us more full or whole in the service to Krishna, because I'm fully present. Not part of me is not present because it's kind of cut off. So I think this is some connection that can be drawn, and over the years I feel like more and more that this the clear line between devotional service to Krishna. This is some, let's say, Sattvic or psychology thing. It became more intertwined, so to speak, because so many interactions that like we have in our, let's say, spiritual relationships, they're based on how much, for example, am I able to, for example, show myself, if it's about talking about things that move us, how am I able to understand and listen, to talk, to use language, to apply principles. So this all goes along. In order to be, say, healthy, complete human beings, we need to apply certain tools, because the more complete, or let's say, I am as a human being, the more I can engage in the service of Krishna consciously. Because the key term, I think, is consciousness, and the Maharaj said I must be aware. And my experience is the more I'm aware, for example, that allowed me even to look at parts that are not pleasant, that are difficult for me, say my past, baggage I carry, sadness I carry from so much stuff that happened in life, my child, my parents, my father, whatever. At the same time allowed that I could approach Krishna with that. Because if I don't have it there, I can also not give it to Krishna, because we're supposed to give everything to Krishna. For example, I experienced then writing a letter to Krishna, or like creating a poem or a prayer, was something very powerful in connection to Krishna, because I felt here that's part of me I usually withheld, but now I show it to you and I take shelter of you. And that was for me a very moving point of connection, also a very important experience. So I think we can observe or pay attention to how connected am I with me and what's going on, although it might be my material condition. But also this might be very relevant in me meeting Krishna in my daily life.
It may look like temple life is not incomplete, because we're not connected with ourselves in temple life, but temple life is life in the ashram for students. We know knowing how to be in Sattvic, and then we go into Grihastha ashram, or somebody goes sannyasi, and then we trying to realize all this knowledge which we receive in ashram of Guru. Actually, in Vedic culture, there was ashram of Guru, and students were educating there. And then you become face to face after ashram, you become face to face in Grihastha ashram with all your desires and problems, and then if we have sincere desire to continue our spiritual practice, then we start to build our life according to these principles, and this huge work for everybody. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
I was just thinking when Lucas was asking that question, purport came to my mind in Bhagavad Gita, 16th chapter, text 3, where Krishna describes the divine qualities, and Prabhupada then writes in the purport, this is German, but let's translate. Everybody has to cultivate these qualities according to his Varna ashram, and then later he says, if all class of human develop these qualities by practice, and yeah, maybe this is one aspect how to see that we have to put an effort into develop certain qualities, and like you said, some tools or sattvic tools can help to do that. It will not happen automatically. We have to make an endeavor, and it's individual who has to develop what qualities, who is maybe better with these qualities and a little worse with these. Yeah, we have to be conscious, proactive, use our intelligence, and that is also one aspect of Sharanagati, that we accept everything which is favorable to the execution of pure devotional service, and so we have to really use our intelligence, like how will I reach the goal? Mm-hmm. It's not that it will just happen automatically. And yeah, I just was reminded of that purport, because when I read it first time it struck me. We have to cultivate, yeah. Sure.
Perhaps we cannot, thank you. We also say it is needed that we consciously choose these things, that we want the quality to be there, because we can also choose to, oh no, better not. No? It could be a quality, let's say, vulnerability, to be open, instead of being closed down, So, but it will not just come at some point, or maybe I will be open. No, I have to choose, to be vulnerable, open, and all the other qualities as well. It starts with making a choice. And sometimes we don't want to make choices. Then we need to look at, okay, why am I unwilling to choose certain something? So now we can go deeper and deeper, pull the layer of the onion to see what's actually deep down there. What is a certain type of faith or idea where I have like this, it's better because we have deep convictions about ourselves also, and what we do and why we do it. And sometimes we don't want to go to the root, but this will be required to, because no one else besides us holds on to the bad stuff. It's not someone, doesn't allow you to let go. Ourselves, we don't allow ourselves to change. So I think that's an important understanding, that, of course, material nature has this influence. It constantly influences strongly. Saying, no, come on, stay there, it's good, it's fine. You say, okay. No, it's also certain counteractions. I know I choose differently. An assertive no to the, and it's work. I know that. And sometimes, also staying in a place where they, let's not be too extreme with changing to the better. Yeah, but yes, there's need for choosing the better. Granted, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
If everything goes well, I will be sweet. I mean, impatient.